It is in this moment that our character of this generation is formed. Our purpose is found. Our future is forged. Well, I know this nation. We'll meet the test, protect freedom and liberty, expand fairness and opportunity, and we will save democracy.
See police here now firing tear gas into the crowd. They are trying to push these folks back. Earlier today, just a few blocks away, there was looting underway nearby. Police seem to have had enough.
The nation around me.
49 hours declaring it a riot.
I'm recording this video in order to foster a shared sense of reality and encourage discord. What is our current political system? Is it liberal Democrats against conservative Republicans? No. These are two sides of the same coin. They are two trains headed to the same station at different speeds. They create and amplify narratives for impossible to solve problems. Here, let me give you an example. The abortion issue is a perfect example of an impossible to solve problem. No matter what your views are on this topic, you have strong views, and whatever action they take on the federal level, half of the country will be upset with it. While the population fights over these social issues, their legislative and executive branches of government continue to enrich themselves with federal tax dollars and influence. Let's look at the net worth of presidents. Before Richard Nixon took office, he had $2 million. Afterwards, $15 million. Gerald Ford, $1.4 million before, $7 million after. Jimmy Carter, $2.3 million before, $10 million after. Ronald Reagan, $10.6 million before, $15.4 million after. Bush Sr., $4 million before, $23 million after. Clinton, 1.3 to a whopping 241.5 after. Bush Jr. doubled his net worth from 20 million to 40 million. Obama went from 1.3 million to 70 million when leaving office, and Donald J. Trump is the only president in modern history to lose money while in office, going from an estimated net worth of $3 billion to a net worth of $2.3 billion once leaving office.
Tonight, we renew our resolve that America will never be a socialist country.
Now, if you think this is going to be a fanboy video for Trump, you are wrong. In order to save some time, though, I'm including a video here of Anomaly on X explaining the point perfectly.
When Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto, there was no income tax in America. His idea to get to communism was a graduated income tax. I consider both the Democrat and Republican Party socialist parties at this point. They both tax insane amounts, and they've normalized it to the point where you think you're winning something. You pick Trump or Biden, and you really think you're beating the other side, but these things are never going to change. And this is not a jab at Trump. People are so sensitive. I'm just saying literally how the system works is why nothing ever changes and continuously gets worse and will continue to do so until people figure this out. Whether Obama, Trump, or Biden is in, they all sign these giant multi-trillion-dollar omnibus bills. Whether it's Speaker Johnson or Speaker Pelosi, the puppets in Congress just argue over, should we send hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine, or no, that's bad, we should just send hundreds of billions of dollars to Israel over time. And you put on a MAGA hat or a pussy hat and fight in these cultural battles, which will never get deep enough to change the, in my opinion, communist income tax that both parties don't care about, and the foreign aid that is spiraling out of control.
It's about giving people the resources and the support they need so that everyone can be on equal footing and then compete on equal footing. Equitable treatment means we all end up at the same place. and what needs to happen in terms of people who otherwise have evidenced themselves having a feckless quality to show some courage to reject the false notion that suggests you're either in favor of the Second Amendment or you want to take everyone's guns away, when in fact it's just reasonable. I support the Second Amendment, but it's reasonable to say we need an assault weapons ban. It's reasonable to say we need universal background checks, that we need red flag laws.
Governor Ron DeSantis making headlines in the Middle East today with an appearance in Jerusalem.
He signed new legislation cracking down on hate crimes right here in Florida. Local 10's Glenna Milberg joins us live from Tel Aviv.
DeSantis delivered the keynote at Jerusalem's Museum of Tolerance and seized that moment to sign a Florida bill criminalizing the kind of anti-Semitic acts on the rise.
We're fighting back.
Headline as we're on the air this evening, north of the border. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau declaring a national emergency now to end the trucker protests and to halt anyone coming from the U.S. to join the protests.
As of today, a bank or other financial service provider will be able to immediately freeze or suspend an account without a court order.
Trump did have a slight stumble this week while talking about banks, and he introduced an interesting new term called debank.
We're also going to place strong protections to stop banks and regulators from trying to debank you. They want to debank you, and we're going to debank.
I don't know what the hell debank means.
And then we call it the wrap-up smear. Call it the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it.
We need to know, are we about to put somebody on the United States Supreme Court who committed a sexual assault?
I believe the survivor. I believe the woman.
I just want to say to the men of this country, just shut up and step up.
And then you write it, and if they see it's reported in the press that this, and this, so they have that validation that the press reported the smear.
All that time he was out fooling around with his buddies. And we know what that means, and it doesn't mean what he says it means.
A woman says the president's U.S. Supreme Court nominee, Brett Kavanaugh, assaulted her when she and Kavanaugh were both in high school.
There is evidence suggesting to her that he was part of the gang rape.
And then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic.
We believe survivors! We believe survivors!
Who are you? Anyway, who are you to talk about it? And tell all these women they don't know what they're...
Questions that will determine if you are one who is duped by hoaxes. I will tell you in advance that everything on this list is a hoax, a known hoax, a really well-known hoax. If your news source believes that these are true, you need to change your news source. All right. Number 1, Russia collusion hoax. Number 2, the Steele dossier hooker story. 3, Russians paying bounties on U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. Number 4, Trump calling neo-Nazis fine people in Charlottesville. Number 5, Trump suggested drinking or ingesting bleach to COVID. 6, Trump overfed koi fish in Japan with the Prime Minister, I guess. And 7, Trump cleared protesters with tear gas for a Bible photo op. Number 8, Hunter's laptop was Russian disinformation. Number 9, elections were fair because no court found major fraud. And number 10, January 6th was a, quote, insurrection to overthrow the government. Now, how many of you think one of these hoaxes is true?
When I mention now names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
But with some exceptions.
So twice you've described U.S. presidents making decisions and then being undercut by their agency heads. So it sounds like you're describing a system that's not run by the people who were elected in your telling.
That's right. That's right.
And this is his first step to reestablishing tell you kind of the lead up, what happened in the lead up of the Ukraine war. The Ukraine war, we were lied to because we're told, oh yeah, this evil Putin trying to take over Europe, and this is his first step to reestablishing the Soviet Empire. And that, it's the same comic
And is that a lie?
Yeah, it's the same comic book description we were given of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, which we were just lied into a war. So between now and then, we moved NATO into 14 countries. Why do we move NATO in? Because when you move them into a new country, they have to sign a contract that conforms all their weapons purchases to NATO specifications, which means you have to buy the weapons from Northrop Grumman, from these big U.S. military contractors who profit from war. The United States government is now running the government of Ukraine. So he then goes right into Ukraine, because into Crimea, and takes Crimea without firing a shot. Doesn't kill a single person, because the people of Crimea are ethnic Russian and want him back, want him in there. Donbass and Lugansk then votes 90 to 10 to join Russia. Putin says, no, I don't want you. I want Ukraine to be a functioning state. But let's sign the Minsk Accords. And they won't sign it. So then he sends in 40,000 troops. I'm almost done with this. Okay. He sends in 40,000 troops. That is not somebody who wants to conquer Ukraine. It's a nation of 44 million people. All he wanted was us back at the negotiating table. Zelensky, we will not help Zelensky negotiate.
So is Russia the good guy in your mind?
No, Russia, it was illegal what Russia did. We have to understand that they don't want this war. We wanted the war.
There's a reason MSNBC is cartoonish as they pose as liberals. They're not liberals. It's General Electric Pentagon operation playing the part of liberals to make liberals look like complete buffoons. And it's the same thing with Fox. They're meant to make conservatives look like complete fools. And to keep people in the left-right paradigm while discrediting both wings of the same bird of prey and controlling the opposition. So we're going to be discussing that today as well. You go back 110 years ago, there weren't discussions about left and right in this country. There were discussions about right and wrong. There were discussions about the corrupt mega-rich trying to suppress and dominate and rob the general population. That's what the talks were about in 1776, in the 1830s, in the 1860s, in 1913. Americans knew who their enemy was. The mega-rich that are bigger than any corporation, that are bigger than any government, that are bigger with their combined forces than any major empire. That is what societies have been facing for so long throughout history. You see, it's the mega corporations that lobby for socialism on record at the grassroots to then transfer your wealth into their hands through government. And they can use government to shut down their competition. As much fun as it is to hate communists and hate Obama and say he's a communist when he's financed by Wall Street, the facts are, and this is even in the Wall Street Journal of all places, big insurance wrote the health care plan to make you buy health insurance, to rip you off, and to raise the prices on record. And there is no pre-existing coverage. The feds can now deny people coverage. They can lower the standards of quality. It takes the medical system away from doctors and gives it to government. The TSA is meant to destroy the 10th Amendment and seize control of all infrastructure and transportation. It's on record, 12 million given just in the last month. Caller called in about it last week. I looked it up. It was true. 12 million given in November to the Senate alone by Mega Agra, the giant big agribusiness cartels, to pass the, quote, Food Safety Act. Almost all the big violations of the food quality on record have been the big mega agribusiness. And I mean, you see it in the news all the time. Tyson can have 1,000 violations at one plant. A smaller outfit can have one violation. They're shut down. That's how this works. And so big agribusiness, they gave $12 million just in the last month to the Senate to pass the bill. Now, the Senate was so arrogant, they knew the big rule, no spending bill can be created in the Senate. It has to be created in the House. It has to originate there. So now it's going back to the Senate. But look at how the insurance takeover with the government health care written by the big insurance companies. Look at how the takeover of the farms and ranches written by big mega agribusiness. Look at how the big mainline dinosaur media is supporting internet takeover by the government. Look at how on every front this stuff is written by the government. For the big mega corporations that are waging war against the free market. Now, I've got a bunch of examples of this today, and people need to shift their paradigm. Just like you can program a computer wrong, or you can brainwash a child from birth and program their brain wrong, we have literally been given false political roadmaps, and that's why you can't have an educated discussion with the average American or European for that matter, because they're so disconnected from reality, so tied in to the distractions and the pageantry and the way the media hypes it up that the buck stops with the president, when presidents have been puppets in this country for a very, very long time. We have to look past all the political distractions and really get to the meat and potatoes of how this world actually operates.
Why does any of this even matter? I do not accept living in a fractured reality. I think we need to look at the United States objectively and clearly. Let me ask, does anything in this chart not land in the socialist side of the box? We're a socialist country. We're headed towards government control of all means of production. Free speech no longer exists. Marxists have inherited the White House, pushing for de-arming of the citizens, centralizing a digital currency, and censoring the free exchange of ideas.
Oh, you don't know what you're talking about, and I do. And it's like, because I read, I don't know what newspaper would be equivalent there, but I read the New York Times, I read the Washington Post, therefore I'm an informed citizen. It's just unconscionable. And again, there are case after case of, authors, vice presidents, and reporters who went to these places and feel comfortable pontificating to their lessers about what things are really like over there.
Well, wasn't there this, is it Durante, the New York Times journalist, who got a Pulitzer for basically covering up all the atrocities that were happening in the Soviet Union?
Technically, he got the Pulitzer earlier because he also got an interview with Stalin. So that wasn't why he got the Pulitzer. But the headline was Russians not starving, merely hungry, or something to that effect. The actual headline of the book. It's not. I get why you laugh, but it's like these are millions of people who are starved to death intentionally. And the thing that's really scary, he said, oh, there's no famine, nor is there likely to be. And then he says, the Russians are merely tightening their belts. Well, you know why you tighten your belt? Because you don't have food. It's not a fashion statement. They're not doing the treadmill. And the way which I didn't even realize how the Holodomor worked, they wanted to requisition all the grain. They wanted to break the kulaks. So they would go to your home in the middle of the night. And if you weren't gaunt, if you weren't losing weight, they knew you were hiding food. Your own body would betray you. It was the law that you had to starve. And when Gareth Jones, the reporter, went to these villages, they all told him the same thing. We're doomed. There's no food coming. And it's a really kind of something that's been swept under the rug historically. And thankfully I could discuss it a little bit more in this book. So I think these glib hand wavings are things that I find uncomfortable. And again, this is one of the reasons I wrote this, is because people think authoritarianism is just like, okay, you have to go to school and they teach you stupid things and you can't speak out about politics and everything else is fine. And if that was the extent of it, I'm kind of almost fine with that, right? We're talking about living from morning to night in constant fear. And at night, you're waiting for the doorbell to ring, when you don't know who's going to turn who against each other. And the techniques that the Soviet Union used to make sure people broke, which I discuss extensively in this book, were very clever. I mean, they were very smart about how, because people sit here and think, okay, there's nothing you can do to me that's going to make me kind of, spill or sign a confession I didn't sign. Well, you have children, don't you? So when you have this kind of collective guilt, and when human life and human rights don't exist, very quickly, no matter how tough you are, let's get your kid in front of you and see what you're going to confess to. You had Jews confessing to plotting with Hitler, since before Hitler was in power. It was just absolute madness. You're arrested, Konstantin, right? Then your wife is arrested for being an enemy of the people. What's she going to do? She can't really plead innocent. But right away, your kids are now orphans overnight. Now, the thing is, what happens to these kids? This happened to Gorbachev when he was a kid, because one of his grandfathers was arrested, and in his words, his house became a plague house. Now, none of the other kids are going to play with that kid. The teachers are going to make it a point to distance themselves from that kid. In fact, there's a story in the book where, one girl who overnight became an orphan because her parents were vanished. She had a family friend. They took her in, but he went to someone high up in, I believe it was Moscow or St. Petersburg, and said, what do we do about this kid? And it's like, look, do you want to be associating with the daughter of the enemy of the people? Because that makes it look like you're conspiring with them. So they had to put her on the street. So there was hand-wringing in the Kremlin, because all these kids are understandably killing themselves now, because not only are they orphans, like no one will talk to them or associate with them. So again, no matter how bad we all think it can get, there's more layers to hell in this evil place.